This is working. I'm trying to go live on the shorts feed and on my regular. So this is an experiment. I hope it works out. I hope nothing is messed up. Because I had to re-download Streamlabs and it was giving me all kinds of weird messages. And so today, my partner and I and my son went out to a place called San Francisco. It's Shipibo community, and we were looking for Psilocybe subcubensis, the Amazonian strain of cubensis, and it took us all day to find the cow fields, so we didn't actually pick any. But the Shipibo are incredibly nice people. It was a really great community. And the ayahuasca patterns are drawn all over the no data. What do you mean, no data? Okay, I guess I'm live again. I don't know what happened. It looks like it dropped the stream for a second. We may have issues doing this. I don't know. I'm going to keep trying, I guess. So, let me know in the chat, too. Okay, stream is fine. Good to hear. What was I saying? Okay, so we were out in the Shipibo community and didn't find the mushrooms, but we did. My partner said something about seeing a snake, and I thought, she said we're going to see a snake, so we're going to see a snake. And you might think you're in the jungle, you probably see snakes all the time, but we don't. With the exception of when we were living in the Quechua community and we had a lot of Dos Equis, or fertile ants, the most dangerous viper in South America. Always, there was one under the couch one time right next to my son's toys. That was really terrifying. And then 2 or 3 days later, my partner went out to do laundry in the sink, and there was one sitting somehow on the ledge, on the edge of the washing thing, which was 4 feet off the ground. So somehow it was a little one, and it got up there somehow, up the bricks. I don't really understand how that happened. Maybe it dropped from a tree, but whatever. The point is there were lots of them there. But we haven't seen a snake in 3 months. So it just kind of reminded me that I've actually had a huge number of this type of synchronicities with snakes, and it's always that I would mention a snake and then we would see a snake. And the first couple of times it was just like that. I actually said, we haven't seen any snakes, it was when we first moved down here. And 10 minutes later, this huge black rat snake, the South American version, went darting across the trail. And just a bunch of times I would do that, and then we would see the snake, right? So then one day, after this had already occurred 4 or 5 times, I was in her parents' study in Vilcabamba, and I pulled a, I can't remember the guy's name. He's an Indian guru. He's kind of full of crap. He claimed that the Bhagavad Gita mentions synchronicities or something ridiculous like that. Deepak Chopra. I grabbed one of his books off the shelf and just randomly opened it, and it said the wizard can inject experiences into his day, vary it with concision. He can just conceptualize something, and bam, there it is. So about a year earlier, I had been walking up to the house on the trail they don't have a driveway. You have to walk over the mountain just to get to their house. So I was walking on this path to go to the house, and there's a coral snake sitting in the walkway. And so when I read that in the book, I thought, okay, I want to see that same coral snake again. So an hour later, I go outside, I start walking up the steps, and there's that coral snake sitting right on the steps. And I had not seen it in a year. I can't be absolutely positive it was the same one, but it was the same size, same species. So, just really, really interesting to me that every single time I say something about seeing a snake, or my partner says something about it, we see the snake every single time. And then another incident that's maybe a little bit more wild even. I had a client here a couple of years back, and this property, we had never seen any snakes. And we had realized that the property owner was not cool. She was just exploiting the locals and kind of demanding that we also didn't pay them minimum wage so that they wouldn't get it in their heads that they deserved to be paid enough to survive. It was really messed up. So I was like, we got to find another property. And we went out to drink ayahuasca that night, and I kind of just asked, Great Spirit, show me a path forward, right? And the answer I got was, first, tell your friend that tomorrow you will encounter a serpent down at the house. And that'll be the sign to take me seriously, when I tell you stuff. Because I've had a problem for a long time, really committing to like listening to the, you don't really want to do what voices in your head tell you to do. I mean, not that you don't want to do it, but it's good to have healthy skepticism, I guess is what I'm saying. But so I was like, all right. So I told my friend that I was with, we're going to encounter a serpent tomorrow. And so we go down back to the house, get up in the morning. That evening, the next day, exactly as the medicine said, my partner says, hey, there's a snake out here. I remember we had seen 0 snakes there, and it was on the porch, like right outside the door. And it was definitely venomous, but I just knew, I just picked it up. It was really small. But that's another thing about me and snakes. Part of the subject of this stream is the fact that we all seem to have some kind of spirit guide or totem animal. And mine has been the anaconda since I was a tiny, tiny, tiny little kid. Like the first time I saw one, it was just my favorite animal in the entire world. I actually finally got to see one in the wild, I think last year. Thank you, David Pruitt, for your support and coming and just picking us up and taking us to Cubilleno. So anyways, I've always had this relationship with snakes. Where I could pick up a wild snake. On 2 occasions, actually, I caught a snake, and my friend said, different friends, different years, different places, but whoever I was with is like, oh, let me hold it, when they saw me not getting bit, and I handed it to them and immediately bit them. And of course, we're talking about non-venomous snakes, but it's just a strange thing. Like, they're just super calm with me, and of course, the anaconda symbolism, as I've gotten older and ayahuasca has become so important to me, and and I live in the Amazon and all that, the fact that I just like connected with this animal so profoundly has turned out to have meaning as my life has progressed, right? So that's also really interesting. And I started learning coding the other day for an AI program, and I was like, is this really what I should be doing? And then I looked, and the code language was called Anaconda. It's like a variation of Python. And it's like, well, clearly this is what I'm supposed to be doing, So here's the rest of the serpent story, though. Remember that we were looking for a new property. And basically I posed the question to, I don't like to say to ayahuasca, because I believe that it's not really actually the spirit of ayahuasca. It brings filters down that connect us to a greater intelligence. That's my opinion on it. So let's call it the universal mind, whatever you want to call it. Told me that we would see the serpent, and then I would be shown the path to this new property. So the next day, I go to town, and I'm walking down the street in Tena, and I see something I need in a shop I've never been in before. It's a bottle of agua de florita, which we use during ceremony. And I see it, and I'm like, oh, I need that. So I go in, and I start talking to this Quechua shaman that owns the little shaman shop, and for some reason, he just starts telling me, like, yeah, we have this property that we're trying to rent, and it's right on this river, and he had pictures, and I was like, really? This is the next day, and it's the only person I talk to, the only person I talk to, right? And so, and I'm thinking, okay, well, we don't have the money to rent this, 500 hectare I think there was like 20 rooms or something, and it was right on the river. There was gold in the river. We were out there with the sluice all the time getting the gold. There was ayahuasca and chaliponga growing everywhere, all of the medicinal plants that you could possibly need. So we could do plant walks and ID everything. There was uña de gato. There was the leche from the Dr. Sandi, which is like a cure-all tonic that's used for pretty much everything in Ecuadorian ancestral medicine, I guess. So he said, okay, well, just come and move in, and if you have clients, you can give me a percentage. So we didn't even have to rent the property. We didn't need a huge down payment to acquire it or anything. You know what I mean? It was just completely mad that would happen literally 2 days after the ceremony. But you see what I mean about this connection with the totem animal and the synchronicities. It's really an extraordinary thing. And I think that everyone probably can determine, just like you can figure out your archetype, right? Or your sign, you can determine what your spirit animal is. And I think a lot of people just know this intuitively. Like my son, for example, this is crazy, wild shit here. His name is Nagual, which is Nahuatl. It's an Incan dialect. And so I believe the Incas actually spoke it, but the Nahuatl are like an offshoot. Speaking of my son, hey, could you take that truck elsewhere? It's so loud, it's distracting, buddy. Just take it over to the kitchen or something, please. Thank you, buddy. It references a certain type of shaman or a spirit that transforms into a wolf or a jaguar, right? So when we first moved to Misawali, we were walking down the street one day, and I saw a Warani woman, which was really significant for me, it turned out, because speaking of synchronicities, the first book that I read about the Amazon that really got me interested in the jungle was called One River by Wade Davis, and there's this story about these Christian missionaries that go and land with these Waranis, and the Waranis killed everyone on the... They came twice. The first time, as they were leaving the Warani, you're giving them all these like parrots and turtles and stuff. And they thought the gifts meant that they liked them. And what they were actually saying is, if you come back, we'll kill you. But here's some stuff, take some trinkets and animals and get out of here and don't come back. And so they came back. And the story is that they dropped a photograph. And that was a big mistake. The Warani were like, you're trying to trap our souls in this plastic thing here. And they weren't wrong, right? The missionaries definitely were trying to trap their souls. Anyways, they killed everyone on the plane. And we had walked by this plane every day when we stopped in Shell for like a month. And I'm like, what is this plane doing on? It was like on a spear almost, like a pole. There's like a plane on a pole, Like, what is this? And it was that plane. But I had no idea. I'm walking by this plane from my childhood every day. And then, so we get to Misawali, and I see this Warani woman. It turns out that it was the same band of Warani that had killed those missionaries that we had just like randomly landed like right, 30 minutes upriver from them. So, you know what I mean? Like, what are the chances that this story that inspired me to become interested in the Amazon, or much more interested, I guess, than I was in ayahuasca and whatnot as well. It's a great book, by the way, if you've never read it. Wade Davis was a student of Richard Evans Schultes, who was kind of like a psychedelic Indiana Jones. He had a lot to do with the discovery, I guess, of ayahuasca. He was the first, I guess, white outsider to document it back in the, I guess, 50s. Or what the fuck was that? Oh my God. Giant flying cockroach just flew by my head. Oh, the jungle. So anyways, Richard Evans Schultes, first botanist to really study and document ayahuasca. He used to keep a bucket of peyote buttons by his door, and he taught at Harvard, so kids could like eat the peyote buttons and then write a paper about what happened. for extra credit to improve their grade or whatever. And so, yeah, excellent book. Definitely check it out. So anyways, this Warani lady, I didn't know all this yet, obviously. And she comes up to us. She's got a spear in her hand and face paint and the whole, I would say she's dressed traditionally, but that's not real. The Warani are naked traditionally. The men just tie a string to their penis that holds it up so it doesn't get hit any stinging nettle or whatever when they're running around in the jungle. And so she comes up to us and she says, you should name your son Kamperi. And Kamperi is Warani for jaguar. So his name is already Nahuatl for jaguar. And on another occasion, we were walking in Shuar territory in Gualaquiza, and this random Shuar guy, probably a shaman, looks at my son and he goes, jaguar, and just keeps walking. And this has happened, I think, 3 times now, where an indigenous person has said, his name is Jaguar, or he is a jaguar, or, something to that effect. Pretty wild. And then, maybe it's related. I don't know. Maybe it's a past life thing or whatever, but it's also a little bit strange. When he was 18 months old, he saw us picking psilocybin mushrooms out in a field, and he started picking them, but he never picked one that wasn't correct, even as a little tiny child. He picked them and gave them to his mom, and always got the right ones. Also, his second word was Bobinsana, and I think he could identify, I have this video actually, I've never posted it, but he could identify, I think, 12 plants, medicinal plants in the jungle by the time he was 18 months old. He would come out of the jungle, we had it in our yard, so he could go a few feet in without supervision, really. And he would come out with edible food. He would find stuff, and that just seems really odd to me that someone that young is capable of that sort of thing. So let's try to get back on the subject of the stream. I wonder, this appears horizontal as the other one. Huh. Well, that's weird. Let me look at my... Huh. Well, the settings are correct, so I don't know, guys. I'll have to keep goofing around with this and see if I can get it right eventually. But yeah, so let's get back on the subject of the spirit animals and whatnot. Of course, the owl is another one. People, know that the owl has some kind of, profound energy, right? And it's a symbol of completely different things to different people. And I think that's interesting as well. When people talk about animal symbolism, the fact that it's inconsistent across the board kind of makes me wonder, how legitimate can it be if people completely disagree about what it means? For example, to the Navajo, an owl is a terribly bad omen. But there are other native cultures where the owl is a tremendously positive thing to see. In fact, the Shuar are really fond of the jungle owls. When they drink ayahuasca, they always hope that they'll come around and sing at night because it's an insane thing to listen to. Really a tremendous cacophony if there's a few of them. But yeah, so that reminds me of the one time that I've had what I would call a borderline supernatural experience with an owl. It's difficult to describe this because there was so much happening subjectively over a period of time, but I had started to develop this weird relationship with the concept of the owl. And at the time, I was reading a lot about Masonic stuff. I just kind of gotten into it, and Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, his papers. And I had noticed that the owl was a symbol of the mysteries. And so I had been looking into that a lot. And there was, just some really strange circumstances surrounding owls. And so one night, as the Phoenix process is getting underway, things were getting more and more intense, and the synchronicities were more and more happening in aggregate, like a storm of this kind of stuff, right? I started hearing this owl, like, down the street. And at first, it was just, hoo, 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 but every night. And I didn't think too much of it. I thought, well, that's, I'm thinking a lot about owls, and now there's an owl here. But then one night, it sounded like it was completely all the way down the end of the valley. And then I heard the sound of its hooting shoot all the way up to my backyard. But I noticed immediately that it was not possible. It was hooting the whole time, and I've never heard of an owl hooting while it's flying. Maybe that happens, but the point is that it was impossibly fast. There was no way that it traveled that far, that fast, and I couldn't see it. I never saw it, actually. But at one point, I had my head down, and I was thinking, and I heard this, like, not really like flapping of wings, but just like a weird, like, warbling kind of sound. That it was like as if a bird was flying by, but it was like warped somehow. And it flew right over my head, and then I could hear it hooting in the house. And I turned around, and the sliding glass door is closed. And I'm like, what in the fuck is happening? And it wasn't in the house, obviously. The whole thing stopped. But that the owl synchronicities continue to just snowball and snowball and snowball. And so that, I guess, the local natives there talk about how sometimes the animals are actually spirits, and they appear as animals, and they kind of function as animals, and it might even be the spirit of an animal, an actual animal, or it could be a skinwalker, or it could be a shaman, like a road. What are they called? The peyote road man. So that's my one like spirit animal encounter story. Obviously I don't know what to think of it. Pretty wild shit. So the other story that I wanted to share has to, speaking of Navajo, I guess it just reminded me of this. There was a girl that I knew that was Dene, which is what the Navajo call themselves. It means the people. In fact, a lot of Native American, actually, you know what? Most tribes don't like being called Native Americans. It's so funny that white people like try to be polite by doing stuff that people hate. I saw a video recently where this guy went around and asked all these natives, would you prefer Indian or Native American? They were all like, Indian. And then the number of times people have told me not, what you just said Indian, you got to call them Native Americans. Not according to them. So anyway, she was Dene, and we went through some really weird synchronistic experiences together. She came with me to meet with Golden Light Eagle, and that was bizarre because I called Golden Light Eagle to get directions to this event that he was hosting at a hotel in Farmington, New Mexico. And as I was getting ready to hang up, he said, "Oh, by the way, bring your little Navajo friend." And I was like, "What?" And he just hung up. And I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? And the phone rings. And I answer the phone, and it's my Navajo friend. And she's little. And I knew. I was like, it has to be her. So I get her address, and she's like, right on the side of the road. The house is on the way. Like, we didn't even have to like turn off the highway to go pick her up, right? We just like pulled over, got her, and kept going. And it was really, really, really helpful to her. Her husband had, apparently men can get postpartum depression as well. And he was fine. I saw him at the car wash like a few days before. He was just as warm and happy as always. I had experienced this bear synchronicity where I was tearing a awning, I guess it's called. I don't really know, like the overhang of a porch, and pulling the plywood off, and then pulling the insulation out. And my girlfriend had called and said that she saw 3 bear cubs and a mama bear in the tree in front of her house, and got off the phone, pulled out the insulation, bear claws fall out and land on the deck. And so, and remember, this is the beginning of my like rapid spiritual development process, which is called what? An awakening, right? So I run into this Navajo friend of her husband, my friend's husband. And I asked him, what would you make of this? And he said, well, to us, the bear is a symbol of awakening because they hibernate and then they wake up. So it really put that synchronicity into perspective, that, the bear and the symbol of awakening and all that. So, by the way, I've mentioned this story quite a few times, but for those that may not have heard it before, I feel like it's important to mention that it's not like those bear claws just materialized there to make that synchronicity. That's not what I think happened. There were a lot of Dene and Southern Ute people living in that area, and my guess is that it's some sort of blessing to put the bear claws in the structure of the house, and that happened to have been done right there, and I happened to have pulled the insulation out and released them onto the deck at that very moment. So, there's always a like material, explanation for these things, which doesn't discount the universal mind aspect of it. You know what I mean? But there's always some way that things play out that is real. That's one of the limitations of magic that people, I think, a lot of people that experiment with magic and fail, the main reason is that they target things that don't have any conduits to actually manifest, so they give up. Or people ask God to do something impossible and then wonder, they're like, okay, so there's no God because it didn't overturn its own laws of creation in order for me to answer my prayers or whatever. So where are we at with this story? So I ran into him, and he actually had hung himself like 3 days after that interaction. So she had just been through this. She thought everything was fine. She just come home, and they just had their new baby, and they already had a kid. I think she had the kids with her, and he's just in the living room, hanging from the ceiling. And so, she had just been through that, and this gathering was all of these Native American spiritual leaders from all of North and South America, and it was really good for her to come and connect with Golden Light Eagle and all of these other people. And the fact that he knew about her somehow blew my mind. And this is something I've seen with a lot of natives. It's definitely true that they are connected to something that we as Europeans or whatever seem to have kind of lost contact with. And it's very, very rare, especially in North America. The relationship in South America with the indigenous is a lot different. They're far more open with foreigners. A lot of that may be motivated by the fact that there's profit motive now, but it is true that there's way less hatred and But when I was in that Phoenix process modality, they were suddenly it was crazy. They were all talking to me. Like I'd lived there for 5 or 6 years, and I don't think one time, the entire time I was there, no Navajo or Ute person said a word to me unless they were like working somewhere and had to, right? Like not once. And then as soon as I entered into this this state of mind, all of a sudden all these natives are talking to me. In fact, one of them, I'm walking down the street one day in Durango, Colorado, and I see this like 6'4", perfect physique, long black ponytail, all black clothes. Like you could tell this dude was somebody. He just had an air of like, it was just crazy presence. I mean, he looked like he had just walked off a Hollywood set or something. And he had a little short, squat native with him, and he as he's walking up to me, he goes, "Huh, a white man walking between worlds. You don't see that every day." And he just starts teaching me stuff and talking. And the little one, as soon as he said that to me, just stopped and leaned up against the window. And he's like, this is Night Horse. Whatever he's about to tell you is important. He's the most respected medicine man in the Navajo Nation. And I'm not going to get into the whole story now because I've definitely posted it in videos. It was a wild encounter, and that was happening a lot, you know. So they definitely can see some level of spirit world. And so, speaking of that, that Navajo friend of mine, she was actually kind of a client. I mean, we weren't really friends in the sense that we would like go hang out, you know. That's like I was saying, it's kind of not how it was for the most part with the Dene there and outsiders, I guess. But she was at my house one day, and I was thinking, I had this weird feeling that we were telepathically linked at the moment, you know. And I had experienced so much weird stuff with natives in the previous weeks and weeks, probably not months, weeks, that I wouldn't doubt it for a second. So I'm thinking all of this stuff that's like antagonistic, even some of it was sexual, you know, just trying to like get a reaction from her. I didn't really mean any of it, you know, but it did. She would, you know, I would think something outrageous and she would like clear her throat, like, you know, like, and make this face, you know, and I was like, no way. She is definitely hearing this. So I wasn't getting enough of a reaction. Obviously, I couldn't say anything because that would spoil it. So I went way over the top. I don't remember what it was, but I just went like way out of bounds in my head. And she looks at me and she goes, I think you better go outside right now. And she said it with such authority and almost like a threat, you know, that I was like, okay, you know. And so I go out the back door and I open it, and there are all the horses in the neighborhood are like lined up. There's like 4 crows, a bunch of I don't know, like sparrows or starlings, or I don't know what, you know, little birds everywhere. The dogs were just sitting there looking at me, and I turned around and looked at her, and she just like nodded at me, you know. So I just wanted to mention that because we were kind of on the subject of native magic. I have no doubt that she somehow just summoned all those animals to come and arrange themselves, you know. And it definitely had a sort of point to it, which was like, keep it holy, white man, you know. Like, what are you doing over there thinking all of this crazy shit? Yeah, super, super wild, you know. And then something that I feel inclined to speak on is the idea of like totem animal parts being employed for magic. I have obviously mixed feelings about this because on the one hand, I don't feel that it's our place to come down to South America and say, stop killing jaguars, or, you know, stop skinning anacondas or whatever, you know. It's like, I actually lived in a vegan community for a couple of weeks, and the Shuar, who are the local indigenous in Gualaquiza, and one of the most warlike tribes in South America. They were never conquered by outsiders, and they are most famous for sansa, where the head is removed, human, and you remove the skin and then use a mixture of herbs and boiling water and minerals, and you shrink the skin and the skull, and then put the skin back on the skull and sew the eyes, nose, and all the orifices and holes closed so that the skull of your enemy is trapped in there. And then they would wear them on belts so that they're about that big when they're done. So, you know, they're scary, historically anyways. And they were hunting on these vegans' property, and the vegans actually told them to stop. And the Shuar came with shotguns and beat them up. And I was kind of like, well, what the hell did you expect? You're telling them not to hunt on their own land. But you know what I mean? Like, this is a difficult thing for me because I see it a lot. We go to the markets and there's like jaguar claws. And I mean, I even have one necklace that has animal parts on it that I bought from a local indigenous person. I guess what I'm saying is I don't really think it's necessary. I think that the universal mind is like, it's holographic, right? The all is in the all. So that doesn't mean that there's literally a jaguar in every atom in the universe. But I think that the spirit or the essence or the energy or the blueprint of jaguar is in every part of it. Aleister Crowley once wrote that any energy any energy can be transformed into any other type of energy. This is the reason that blood sacrifice is unnecessary. There's no reason to extract energy by killing something, because you can absorb it, you can draw any energy you need, and with the proper skill level, transform it into any type of energy that you might need. And the energy sources in the universe are infinite. And sorry, I just realized I haven't checked the chat in a while. Greetings, Edson. Yeah, okay. Let me look at the other chat. They're not in the same place. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we really do get more traction from streaming on the Shorts feed as well. So far, it doesn't really look like it is doing much. But anyways, where are we at with all this? Yeah, I don't think that it's necessary to, actually physically have the animal in order to draw on its essence. I think you just need to understand what the animal means to you. And that brings us back to the point that I was making earlier about how, different cultures have different perceptions of animals. It's a curse to a Navajo, but it's a blessing to a Shuar to have an owl around. What's going on, Mystic G? By the way, you guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider joining my Patreon. Because we're demonetized, I get no support from YouTube, and so I rely on my wonderful community to help us to pay our bills. There are options for supporting in the chat as well if you want to make a one-time contribution via PayPal or whatever, Cash App. And the Patreon, you get access to 4 or 5 years of secret streams and patron-only material. There's some instruction in ritual magic and various and sundry topics, Freemasonry and all this kind of thing. My plug there caused me to drift in my mind, though. Oh, yeah. People ask me sometimes about animal symbolism, and one of the reasons I haven't done this video until now is that that's why it's difficult for me to really talk about it. And the answer, I think, is that you shouldn't really even look it up, You can go if you're curious, but I think the determination about what the animal's symbolism is and what the energy of that animal is, it depends on what it means to you. What kind of feelings does it evoke? What kind of mental imagery? What is the context of your encounters with these animals? And particularly, I think, if you have a strange encounter with an animal, for example, in the space of only 1 week, I had weird encounters with foxes where they acted tame. They were wild foxes. Scared the hell out of me, honestly, because I thought that maybe they were rabid, because in the one case, it walked in front of my car. I was coming back from this river, where I think I probably almost died because I was like 17 or something, and if you take ketamine intramuscular, it's processed in the body differently. At least that's what I was told back then. And so I experimented with that for the first time, and I was sitting on a rock way out in the river, and then I realized that I was basically paralyzed, and that if I rolled over or fell in the water, I wouldn't be able to move, and so that was dumb, but I was fine. And after a few hours, when I was grounded again, I left, and this fox walked out into the road, and I stopped, and I don't know why I did this, but I just thought, open the door, which is kind of dumb. I mean, foxes carry rabies, and if they're acting friendly, I grew up around rednecks. I know about this kind of stuff, so I opened my door, and the fox came around the door and put its paws up on the, like it's not really a step, but like the door hole, the floor of my car. And so its nose was almost on my leg, and it was just like right there in my car looking at me. And I thought, you could pet this fox right now. And I didn't do it. But, I just sat there and stared at it for, it was minutes. We just sat there staring at each other. So I just eventually walked away, and I closed the door and drove, and I was like, man, that was really strange. But then, maybe 10 days later or so, I was up in the mountains, and it happened again. This fox was walking by, and instead of running away when it saw me, or, it just walked right over to me and sat down, like right next to me. And I'm like, so twice in less than 2 weeks, fox approaches me, what does this mean? And I was much younger then, but now I would be thinking, what does the fox mean? And how can I use this, and what should I be paying attention to? That sort of thing, I think, is like I said, when I was going into that awakening phase, and those bear claws appear under those really bizarre circumstances. These strange encounters with animals are meaningful, and the fact that the owl, for example, symbolizes wisdom to a lot of people. Also, at the beginning of this process, this phoenix process, this owl appears and has some borderline supernatural behavior going on. So, that's the use case, I think, for these animal synchronicities, and the real answer about how to relate to the symbolism is that you have to decide what it means to you. This is a message to you from the universe. Sometimes it's impossible to understand, and sometimes it's not about the animal. I'll give you an example of that. This was insane. I was sitting on the side of the road in Northern California, and I had this big stack of print papers that I had printed out. I didn't have a smartphone. It was a long time ago. So otherwise, I guess now I would just been reading it on Google or something. But I actually had the paper and all these papers just stacked, and I opened random and just grabbed one and started reading it. And it was from one of Aleister Crowley's books, and he was basically saying the neophyte sees a slug, and he thinks, what is this message from the very God of very gods to my very soul, or something dramatic like that. And then he writes, but the master of the temple sees the slug, and he thinks, how do I use this? And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I opened the door and to get out of the car, and there's like a 12-inch banana slug right outside the door in the leaf litter. And, I'm like, okay, let me try to play along here. What do I use this for? And the fact that he chose such a bizarre example, why a slug? Why would you see a slug and think, how can I use this? And this is a message from God. Like, why the hell was it a slug? It doesn't even make any sense. And then there's this banana slug right outside my door, you know? So in that case, it's not about the animal, you know? The synchronicity relates to the development of my being in that moment. It has nothing to do with the animal itself. So, you know, there's a lot of different contexts and a lot of potential modalities of expression that you can kind of encounter and have these experiences under. There's another one that you guys can check this out. It's on my channel too. I got the only video of a non-human animal cooking food in Misawali, lighter monkey. So one day I was sitting in the park, and the alpha of this capuchin group is not really friendly. He put at least one person in the hospital while I was there. Capuchins are normally like skinny and like they're not very scary. They have big teeth, but you know, they're not that scary. They're not that big and they're not very strong. But the alpha was like a pit bull with jaguar teeth. You know, he was ripped and huge, like a really scary monkey. And you know, he had taken things from me, and when I tried to get him back, he'd you know, he would have ripped me to pieces. So, you know, he had never showed any kind of friendliness towards me at all. And I'm sitting in the park. This video is on my TikTok, actually, at Illuminostic. And he just climbs up in my lap and lays down. And I was kind of terrified, you know, like I was like, what do I do? You know, like I didn't want to move because I was scared that he would like change his mind or something in the middle of being in my lap and rip my face off or whatever. So I just sat there and he just stayed for like 45 minutes, just like this monkey's giant ass pit bull monkey, you know, like a pit bull with opposable thumbs and jaguar teeth. And so the next day, that monkey did me a huge favor and made me a considerable amount of money. So there is an apparent connection between this monkey's friendliness and the fact that he did me a favor the next day. At least that's how I interpret these things. I don't really see any way around that. You know, it just makes, it's the only thing that, I don't know, just that has to be the answer. But so the next day, it may have been 2 days, but it was really, you know, less than a week, a day or two for sure. We were in the park and we smelled burning fur, and I was like, whose hair is on fire? So I go around the corner and there's the monkey that it came to be named Lighter Monkey, 22 million views on TikTok and licensed to a bunch of people. That's the favor he did me. He gave me a video that I ended up licensing through Viral Hog. And if I was eligible in this country or had used a VPN, I would have made $6,000 or $7,000 from TikTok for it. But if you're in one of the exploitation economy regions, they don't pay you. They only pay the 7 wealthiest countries in the world. Isn't that cute, right? So I walk over to the source of the burning hair, and there's the capuchin is rolling the wheel of the lighter while holding the lever down so that the lighter lights, and then he's moving it along his fur so that he can cook it and eat it. I guess he liked the taste of the singed hair, but even though it's very simple, it's not like he was cooking eggs or something. He's cooking food. No matter how you slice it, he's legitimately cooking food. So about, I guess, a week after that, I saw him doing it again. And I approached him too closely, and he ran up into the tree, but he couldn't catch the wheel on the wood because it had been raining and it was too slippery. So he dragged it, it wouldn't lay. And I saw him stop and look at the lighter and think about it. And then he goes, and lit it like a human, and then starts burning his hair and eating it again. And that was just really wild. I got it on video. You guys check it out on my TikTok. And then all of the males in the entire troop figured it out. They all started, they would run up, stick their hands in your pocket, pull your lighter out, or they would drop, the stores all had holes in the roof, and the monkeys would drop by their tails when the cashier turned around, grab a lighter, and then pull themselves back up. So they would drop down, grab the lighter, and they're gone. Like the whole thing took like 3 seconds or less. And they would steal lighters, and so you're walking around Mississauga, and they would be on the roofs, and you'd see monkeys with sparks, and they're in the trees lighting the lighters, and it's just really weird that all these monkeys are. But yeah, to my knowledge, it's the only video extant of a non-human animal cooking food. So, I mean, maybe it's not connected, that the only time that monkey was ever friendly to me, within a day or two, he did something for me that made me a few $1,000s. That just, I have trouble writing that off as coincidence. And on top of that, it's not like we were friends afterwards. If I approached him, because I thought that he was going to be friendly now, because he spent 45 minutes in my lap. But I walked up to him, and he bared his teeth, and, he's like, well, I'll rip a hole in you, dude. Get away from me. So... pretty wild monkey stuff. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that, I think. Unless you guys have questions, I'll be happy to try to field them. Another thing that I was going to mention, I guess, though, is the tentacles. This is a weird one because, like I said, I mostly have come up with my own interpretations of the symbolism of these various animals based on my experiences and my intuition. A little bit of study, but only if it was an accident. I encounter it while I'm reading about something else. But one of the things that occurred to me at some point is that for whatever reason, tentacles are symbols of telepathy, the octopus, and after I came to that conclusion, I started to see other references to octopus and telepathy, and I don't really know why. I'm not sure if there's something about the octopus that, it has 8 brains. I don't know if that's maybe... But, there's nothing overt. The only thing I can think of is that it changes color based on emotion, so it kind of wears its thoughts on its body, which is, in a way, sort of a telepathy thing. I mean, I don't know. But it became obvious to me soon after that there were a lot of other people that associated these tentacles with telepathy. Cthulhu. I don't really know the story of Cthulhu. If that has something to do with telepathy, if you want to explain in the chat, I'm interested to hear it. But after I came to this conclusion, I read a book called The Illuminatus Trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson that I would definitely recommend to anyone. One of the most important things on earth, in my opinion. And in that book, there is this organism that is, when people heard that voice they thought was God, he said, it was actually this organism saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega, because it lives at the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. And by the way, in this book, Robert Anton Wilson gave the coordinates of a pyramid that was at the bottom of the ocean. And right before he died, I think in 2013, the pyramid was discovered in exactly that spot. So, this crazy stuff in this book, a lot of it, you don't really know whether to take it seriously or not because of stuff like that. And it's not the only thing in there. There's also the Black Flag operations, where the United States government attacked its own buildings in order to justify passing legislation that stripped away everyone's rights. You guys remember something like that happening? This book was written in 1974. So basically 9/11 is in it, and it's 1974. Definitely you should read it. It's just completely mind-blowing. And a lot of it was actually constructed by taking LSD. There are two authors, Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson, and they cut up a lot of the parts and put it in a hat, and then they just took the parts out and taped it together, and then ordered the book that way, just like intuitively splicing the story together. Yeah, so it's just really wild. But anyways, this organism is a single-celled organism, and it's the Leviathan, which is kind of like the sea devil, basically. There's a devil, an archdevil, I guess. It's sort of like, you know how there's a tree of life, and then there's a clipote tree of life? It's kind of the same concept, that if there are 4 archangels, then there are also 4 like archdevils, because everything in the universe is balanced by its opposite. So there's a devil for each of the elements, just like there is a archangel for each of the elements, according to this idea. And so the water devil is Leviathan. And according to Robert Anton Wilson's take on this, it is where our consciousness actually emanates from, and it is the first organism, and the cells never divided. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's like this pyramid-shaped thing with one giant eye and tentacles. And I mean, I'm sure it's just a ridiculous... but I thought that was really interesting that I had come to this conclusion, and I read this thing about this tentacled thing that's emanating all of our consciousness from the bottom of the ocean. And it's like, well, you know, where did I get this from? Where is this coming from? And then you guys might be familiar with the fact that the Grateful Dead really claimed to be telepathic. They would have these moments in their music where these structures would emerge that sounded composed, and they would be impossible to conceive of and then execute. Like, when it happened, it was on a level that, you know, difficult to even perceive it, much less do it. And so the tentacles, they also use as symbolism of telepathy. At their 50th anniversary show, if you guys watch there was the show in Santa Cruz, and then they went to Chicago. So I don't know if they used the same graphics in Chicago, but if you watch the show from the first night in particular, they show Garcia like getting in the ocean and scuba diving, because that was like his favorite thing to do. But then he'll like morph into this tentacled being, and then the tentacles turn into devil horns, and it goes on throughout the whole night. It was really just strange to witness that, and I understood. I knew exactly what they were referencing, you know. But why? You know, why do we all have this intuitive perception of these tentacles being somehow connected to telepathy? I don't know. If you do, let me know. Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, he's telling me that Cthulhu also is a tentacled being that reads your thoughts. Where is this all coming from? You know, I didn't know that. Where is it all coming from? You know. So that's interesting, and it also challenges my position that it's subjective, and that your interpretation of the spiritual essence of some animal, you know, is just a subjective interpretation. There's weird consistencies also, like this Leviathan, the tentacles, and telepathy. I feel like there was more to that octopus thing, but I don't recall. All right, so it's AMA time. If anybody has anything for me, otherwise I might do a music stream tonight, because I'm kind of excited about the fact that we can now stream to people's shorts feed. That could be very helpful for me. So questions, going once, going twice. Let me look in the other stream and see. I haven't been following this chat. Hi guys in the shorts feed. Crow's realm is upper world middleware, spiritual and shape-shifting medicine, magic, adaptability, loyalty, and craftiness. Symbolics meaning you are divinely cared for and guided pay. Oh, yeah, that's another one. Actually, speaking of crows, Aleister Crowley stylized himself as the Antichrist, right? His last name, Crowley, literally means crow-like. This is the bird. He was, whether you love him or hate him, he is definitely a genius. I mean, even his biggest critics didn't dispute that he was a genius. There's just no way around it. And the crow is a symbol of high intelligence, and it's also a symbol of the devil. That was his birth name, and the suffix is that suffix "ly" means like. Like my last name also is English and Gaelic or Gaelic, and Don is king and Lee is like. So my last name means king-like. Crowley's meant crow-like. So that kind of stuff to me is evidence of a universal mind. And when people say things like, all that is metaphor, it really seems to me like it's like the 3D printer of the universe is incorporating this symbolism into every aspect. It's like the energy of the thing is manifesting in every different aspect of its creation. A really great way that I've heard this explained is that the true scripture is written large upon the land for those who have eyes to see it. And that's the kind of thing that's being referenced. That's actually from Morals and Dogma, which was written by a 33rd degree sovereign commander of the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, Albert Pike. Let me continue checking in the chat here. There's got to be a way for me to see them both at once. This is kind of obnoxious. Animal bones have mystical significance. Oh, that's crazy that you asked that, and I wasn't looking at the chat when I. Oh, weird. Did you ask that and then I answered it without looking at the chat? That's what happened, because it looks like the next comment is about the indigenous having the right to hunt on. That's crazy. What did the fox mean to me? Well, that's the thing. I wasn't really thinking as much like this back then, so I can't imagine that I didn't wonder if it meant something at the time. But at least at the time, I didn't really think too much about it. And of course, the fox is a symbol of craftiness, and they're actually terrifying. We had to trap one because it was living in the not gutter, but I don't know, rain, gutter, in the pipe. And my then girlfriend had a toddler, and it was just too close to the house all the time. It just was uncomfortable. So we trapped it to release it far away. And the sound that if you approached the cage, like it was insane. It sounded like more like a mountain lion or something than like a little tiny fox. What's up with crows always stalking me? I was out in the garden and made another crow friend. Attention, have faith. Yeah. All right, let me check the other chat again. It disappeared. Why? All right, let me see. All right, well, I don't see any questions. So, going once, going twice. I haven't had dinner, so I guess I'm going to go get some dinner. And make sure you guys tune in, subscribe, hit the bell so that you get notifications. You probably won't, actually, because my content is deprioritized People give me mixed. Some people say they do get the notifications. Other people say they don't. So if you really want to make sure that you get notified, join my Patreon or the Discord. But please at least hit the like button. Consider sharing the videos and supporting the channel, because we're demonetized, and without your support, I don't get any compensation for the billions of hours that I make. Yeah, I'm multi-streaming to the shorts feed and to the... but Enrica tells me that it's not actually vertical. StreamYard says it is. I don't know what's going on with that. But what I was saying is, make sure that you tune in to the Michael Levin, the next Michael Levin reaction video that I'm going to do. It's really interesting stuff. And I'm going to continue. I'm probably going to do one of those a week until we have gone through all of his talks. So follow that, because there are things that I feel like he deliberately avoids. Just as Carl Jung back in the day didn't really like to acknowledge, that he obviously followed Aleister Crowley, for example. If you look at the format of the Book of the Law and the Red Book, the typeset is the same on the covers, Liber Legis and Liber Novus or something. It's just, and they're so similar conceptually too, tapping into the subconscious. And that, it's obvious, but he would never say that. He would never write that. He would never say it. He downplayed his mysticism, closet mystic, because he could not risk his professional reputation with the Muggle world, right? So Michael Levin, I think, is doing that as well. So these reaction videos I'm doing, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but my role is to say the stuff that I feel he's implying but not really saying, And sometimes I have other information from other sources that's related. So, I feel like I do contribute to those. What do synchronicities mean to me? That is a really interesting question. And by the way, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have been, for years, I have had this idea that the reason that synchronicities occur, at least on a mechanistic basis, like the physical world phenomena that allows them to happen, has to do with higher order symmetries, or symmetries that have their basis in the quantum realm, right? They're structural symmetries. So when you build the bridge between the two hemispheres of the brain, which is part of the process of individuation, and it's also what happens when you take psychedelics, there's increased communication between the two regions of the brain, particularly with psilocybin, apparently. So, when you develop this dialogue between the conscious and subconscious mind, your internal world and your external world also have a more profound dialogue. And also, because you're expanding your consciousness, the parameters of your perceptual apparatus, what you're capable of perceiving, expand. And so you are aware of things on a more subtle level. If you absolutely do not believe that something can be possible, you can look right at it and not perceive it. There was also, there's the legend about the boats coming to South America, and the tribe couldn't see them. And the shaman told them, they could see the waves, they say, the ripples, but they couldn't see these giant boats because it was just too far out of their worldview, I guess. And the shaman's like, no, there's these big ass boats with, they're coming, and then the people could see them. So anyways, something along those lines. But, what Jung was saying is that the subconscious, once you develop this dialogue with the subconscious, then these synchronicities start to occur. And I'm suggesting that the reason for that is that you're building a bridge between the external world, which is, in a way, a subconscious mind, your subconscious mind, or unconscious, So there's a symmetry that becomes perceptible. And I just read yesterday that there is a group of physicists that are doing experiments to determine if there are symmetries created on the quantum level that lead to synchronicities. So this idea that I've had is getting, someone is attempting to prove it. So I was kind of happy to see that that idea has been actually picked up by apparently mainstream scientists. And so as far as like what they mean, though, you have to be careful with this. People will read too much into subjective interpretations of coincidences, and you have to remember that you are wading through a veritable ocean of sensory input every day. Like the universe has got a tremendous amount of information. I mean, I can't remember what the number is, but I think our brain is processing like a few billion signals per second. You know, there's a tremendous amount of information. And if you consider how many connections there are and how much information there is, it is actually more probable that you're going to have coincidences that apparently have meaning than not. So if you're interested in maintaining your sanity and retaining critical thinking and skepticism to keep yourself safe and functional, and to ensure that you don't become so open-minded that wind whistles through your ears, you don't want to become a muddle-headed mystic, right? You have to be objective about these things and remember that, you know, it may not be that there is meaning to any particular synchronicity. People get themselves in trouble chasing spirit, as I've heard it called, because it can be that it's just a matter of symmetry. It's just structural. It's not really necessarily that some God or universal mind is communicating with you through these synchronicities. It's structural. It's the same thing as symmetry in a crystal, you know, on one level. But the thing about that is that if the universe is truly a mind, if there's consciousness integrated into the whole thing, it's very likely, and in my experience true, that oftentimes these synchronicities are kind of like breadcrumb trails. Obviously, you know, the stories that I shared earlier about all these encounters with these animals and you know, I actually forgot one, another bear, the bear thing, right? So I was talking about the bear claws that fell out from behind the installation, and my native friend said it's, you know, a symbol of awakening. A week or two later, I was in a very, very exalted state, I guess, and I had stayed up all night on mushrooms sitting on this rock, and I was just, you know, so at peace, I think, is why I didn't get my head ripped off. But I was walking home and I heard something beside me. So I look and there's two bear cubs, like I could have kicked them. And I didn't have, luckily for me, I think, I had no change in my energetic state. And I look over and there's the mama bear, sure enough. And she looks at me and I did not, no wavering of this blissful state. And she just went back to what she was doing. I'm standing right next to her cubs, you know. So, you know, what I'm getting at is that the bear synchronicities and stuff, they weren't without meaning. You know, I had the weird synchronicity with the claws, and then I'm standing right next to a bear with cubs and I don't get killed. You know, you just have to be careful about attributing too much meaning to them under certain circumstances. You know, there's a huge difference between being an adept and an initiate that knows what they're doing, a real magician, and superstitious, you know? And it's a very fine line between these things. So, you know, I generally would not pursue the synchronicities. I would notice them and take note of them, and I would realize the meaning and the context after the fact. That's much wiser, I think, than trying to decode them as they're happening. You may be able to discern at least some general message, you know. Along those lines, though, speaking of superstition and people making mistakes in regards to synchronicities and taking psychedelics and getting a message from some kind of voice. I did a stream. The last stream I think I did was on the twin flame phenomenon and how it's really just like as a cell divides, like in the moment of creation when everything divided, the nun breathed the light, faint and fairy, and two became two, as it says in the book of the law. And then all of everything that followed that same formula or blueprint, right? So all of these monads or single individual units of consciousness divided. And so that's where twin flames come from. And so I think she was responding to that video, or it may have been my Bobin Sana video actually, but I talk about it there too. And I talk in that video about how when I first saw my partner, it was the day after a ceremony, and the Pachamama, the ayahuasca narrator, said, as soon as I laid eyes on her, she will have your babies. And it was the ayahuasca voice, medicine stays with you after the fact quite often. And so I completely ignored it because I thought that's just ridiculous. She's much younger and just didn't, I don't know. I just thought that's just a silly thought. And of course it turned out to be true. And the girl responded that she had taken mimosa, a dieta, I guess, with mimosa. And she said, the mimosa told me that this guy was my twin flame. So she went and pursued it and got rejected very coldly. And so I just wanted to point out that the difference is that I made note of this, but I did not pursue it. I didn't, the import of the moment was contextualized when it became a reality. You don't do the thing because a voice in your head told you, and it's kind of the opposite. So just in case that person happens to be watching, or if that might serve anyone out there, I'm not saying that you should never act on anything that the medicine tells you. But I think it was important for me to point that out, just that's the wise approach, allow the universe to contextualize these things, before trying to act on them, or you may find yourself, made a fool. So let's see the other chat. Okay, well, we're winding down in viewers, and I'm done talking about this. So I'm going to have some dinner, and it's like 11 o'clock. I don't know what happened there, but I'm going to go have some dinner. I'm actually going to eat a small rodent from the jungle. I think it's a rodent. Maybe we have it's either a rodent, it's either a peccary, or this weird little deer sort of thing. It's not really a deer, but it kind of looks like a little tiny deer, but it's not. It's a rodent, I think. I don't know. Anyways, I don't know which animal it is, but always excited to eat, wild game. I think it's really good idea to do that. So please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider joining our Patreon, where you can access secret streams, 5 years of content, and consider supporting us in the chat, because we are demonetized, which not only means that I don't get paid, but it also means that my videos are not pushed out by the algorithm. So we're deprioritized as well. So it's very difficult for me to reach an audience, and I don't get compensated for it. So I appreciate it when you guys do it. That's awesome. By the way, also, I just want to mention before I check out that we are back on track with the Cusco event, because the civil unrest has calmed back down. And I wanted to wait, a month or two and make sure that it doesn't start back up again. But the first person to make their deposit for that event. If it's depending on how long the deposit is for, you get a bigger and bigger discount. It's going to be pretty substantial. So if you are interested in being that person, or if you have a group also, you can get quite a lot of discount. We're going to devote it to Andean medicine mostly. We're going to be high up in the mountains in Pisac, and then we're also going to go down into the jungle and check that out. So it's going to be focused around ritual magic and like the Hermetic traditions and the Western mystery traditions, but also Andean shamanism, and we'll have some guests from the local tribes come and hold ceremony, and it will be amazing, and it's going to happen on my birthday. So come and spend my birthday with me if you would like to. And of course, we'll go to Machu Picchu and some of the other ruins. In fact, speaking of synchronicities, we first came to Vilcabamba, Ecuador, and then we were heading to Pisac, and the village behind Pisac is called Vilcabamba. No one has lived there in 2,000 years, and it hasn't even been excavated yet. So that's another interesting thing, that there's this site that also one of the, I don't remember how to say it, but one of the Quechua words for it is like the spirit hill or spirit valley. So apparently it's a significant place to the people there. And I don't know if it's true of this place as well, but the reason Vilcabamba, Ecuador was called Vilcabamba is that, the Wilca tree, which is Adenananthera, is it Colabrina? Colabrina? One of them is Yopo, the other one is Wilca. I think it's Peregrina is Yopo, and Colubrina is Wilca, yeah. So the valley was named Vilcabamba after the Wilca tree, which is a tree that produces a seed that has several different variants of DMT in it. So surely that will be part of the retreat, probably at the end of the San Pedro, which is actually a really great way to do it, by the way. Yopo is really, really physically uncomfortable. It's not just like purging. There's a feeling of intense pressure throughout the body. It feels even dangerous to an extent. It's not, but you kind of feel like you're going to explode. And then there's like this really terrible body load feeling that is just beyond nausea. It's terrible. But I discovered that if you take San Pedro and then towards the end of the, and this is done traditionally, by the way. I got this idea from one of the shamans in Vilcabamba. It actually smooths out all of the. It's counterintuitive because you'd think it would just, San Pedro makes you queasy, sometimes vomit. You'd think it would just make it worse, but it actually really helps. It smooths out the experience and makes the transition a lot more comfortable. So that's probably what we'll do. Yeah, there are 2 streams because I can stream to shorts as well. So I'm hungry. So thank you all for spending this time with me. I hope that it was informative and helpful to everyone somehow. And I will see you guys again in 20 minutes or so. Cheers.